In this Remnant 2 build guide, we'll be showcasing our second build, the Hightech Sentinel, which is a highly versatile one that can adapt and performs well in both melee or ranged combat. This build mainly revolves around the Engineer's repertoire, the heavy weapons arsenal that can serve as an autonomous turret, or its main weapon specializing in dealing a significant amount of damage. This is fused with the Challenger Archetype that gives players even more flexibility in combat, taking advantage of its melee range augmenting perks and good damage reduction passives. Compared to the loaded sharpshooter build that focuses on pure range and relies on specific skill rotations to deal considerable damage in combat, the Hightech Sentinel's gameplay may vary depending on what type of enemy it's facing. Thanks to its unique design, players will have the freedom to experiment with this build due to the Engineer's heavy weapons or turret system, which is a powerhouse on its own due to the overclocking mechanic. Whether you're clearing a group of enemies or facing a boss in a dungeon, the Hightech Sentinel can provide the firepower that you are looking for. One of the core reasons why I picked the Engineer Archetype is its unique playstyle. Having the ability to deploy my heavy weapons as turrets that can aid me in battle, or use them as my main weapon provides a unique experience. Making the Engineer the main archetype for this build is a must due to the Engineer's Prime perk that concentrates on making the heavy weapons you're using even more powerful. The Hightech Prime perk overclocks the heavy weapon equipped to reach its optimal performance by improving the damage that it deals, improving its fire rate, and providing unlimited ammo for a considerable amount of time. We do have 3 skills or heavy weapons to play with when playing as an Engineer. I do want to mention that each heavy weapon has its strengths, weaknesses, and unique characteristics that players can experiment with. But for this build, we'll be using the heavy weapon Vulcan as our main active skill due to its versatility, good range, great damage output, and ease of use. The Engineer's main archetype trait, Fortify, increases the build's overall defense by augmenting armor effectiveness. Unlocking the Engineer archetype is not as simple as some others though. Players may find it difficult to do so as the crafting material for its engram is well hidden and a pain to acquire. Players are required to explore a specific section near the Titan's Reach checkpoint in Naruud and do specific steps to succeed. Luckily, our wiki has the specific steps to locate the crafting material alien device and craft the Drazier caliper to unlock this archetype, so be sure to check that out if you don't already have it. For the second class, I've picked the Challenger Archetype for 2 very specific reasons. One is to give this build versatility in close-range combat, and the other is to make the build sturdy and mitigate incoming damage. When the Engineer uses a heavy weapon, players will be locked to a specific stance, making them unable to roll, making it challenging to dodge incoming attacks. It's worth noting that using Relics to replenish health while in this stance will not be possible as well. For this reason, I decided to make this build resilient to damage by taking advantage of the Challenger's Juggernaut skill that grants 3 stacks of Bulwark, making this build more tanky. This skill is perfect when the Engineer is in the heavy weapon stance by giving it more mobility and resiliency against damage. On the offensive side of things, Rampage increases fire rate by 15%, reload speed by 20%, and movement speed by 10% for a short period of time. Players will be juggling with these 2 skills depending on what type of enemy they're facing. The archetype trait Strongback, on the other hand, decreases the build's encumbrance by 10, so you can still wear heavy armor while maintaining medium weight. Unlocking the Challenger is much easier than the Engineer, thankfully, and players can select this class when starting the game or by buying the Old Metal tool from Reggie Malone and Ward 13, and crafting the Stel Enswell engram, which unlocks this archetype. Now that archetypes are out of the way, let's talk about the Hightech Sentinel's equipment. The Plasma Cutter boasts high firepower with a speedy fire rate capable of dealing continuous and considerable damage over a short period of time. Its high ammo capacity and reserves make it ideal for this build. Clearing enemies as quickly as possible is one of the requirements for this build to take advantage of the Challenger's Rampage, and the Plasma Cutter is one of the weapons that can do that. We're going to use the Plasma Cutter's special weapon mod, Heatsink. Built to improve the cutter's performance by making this weapon accumulate less heat, it also ramps up its damage even further. Slow heat buildup means more damage that players can crank out before needing to cease firing. This weapon can be acquired by getting the special headpiece called the Navigator's Helm and opening a hidden room and a wrecked ship in Naruud located near the Titan's Reach checkpoint. As for my main mutator, I would advise using the Momentum mutator and taking advantage of its added critical hit chance. Reaching the max stack of momentum is an easy task when using the Plasma Cutter, and players can get the momentum by defeating the aberration named Mantigora located in the Imperial Gardens in Yesha. For my handgun, Enigma is my choice for this build. A very fun sub-weapon to use, perfect for clearing enemy waves in dungeons. Electrocuting targets while the Engineer's heavy weapon is in turret mode is simply a fun and effective way to engage enemies. Its special mod, Chaos Driver, improves Enigma's effectiveness and adds more damage by deploying rods in the field or by attaching to targets that tether and emit shock damage. Enigma can be acquired by getting a special crafting material called Cipher Rod in the Labyrinth. Give it to McCabe to craft this weapon once you have it. Due to the Enigma's ability to hit multiple targets, it's perfect to pair with the Harmonizer mutator. When using the Harmonizer, we can take advantage of its ability to generate mod power for the Plasma Cutter. The faster the plasma cutter gains mod power, the sooner that the players can use its special mod heatsink. The harmonizer can be acquired by visiting Dwell in Ward 13 and buying it in exchange for scraps. The Hightech Sentinel is a versatile build as it can perform in close range combat as well. Getting a good melee weapon will depend on the player's preference. Using the melee weapon is not required, but rather an option for players who are looking for variety. To match the overall aesthetics of the Hightech Sentinel, I use the Atom Splitter. Not only does it deal great damage, but its special mod Fission Strike also releases a powerful shockwave that can hit multiple enemies. The Atom Splitter can be acquired in any of the Narude dungeons, and players need to wait for a specific facility to spawn and do specific steps to access a secret room. You can find more information about this on the Remnant wiki. I paired this sword with the Weapon Lord Mutator. Upon reaching max stacks, the player's next charged melee attack will be an instant critical hit. For the Fission Strike to activate, a melee charge attack should be done after a neutral dodge, and the effect of the Weapon Lord Mutator will proc as well. Players can buy the Weapon Lord Mutator from Merchant Dwell. Moving along to accessories. The Rangefinder is the perfect amulet for this build. Each enemy kill will grant a range damage bonus and can add up to 3 stack. The requirement of the range damage buff is easy to maintain, so players can expect an almost permanent uptime. The Rangefinder can be acquired by exploring the Ascension Spire located in Narude, where the Custodian resides. Players will find a hole that they can drop into and find the Drazir replicator that can track this item. For the first ring, use the probability cord for an instant 30% critical hit damage increase. This ring can be acquired when exploring Root Earth's corrupted harbor zone. The next ring is Braided Thorns, which adds a 15% critical hit chance after killing an enemy that has a relatively easy requirement to fulfill. Buy this ring from Merchant Cass and note its appearance is random, so check her from time to time and pay attention for it. We also use the Grounding Stone ring for the next slot to improve shock damage, since we'll be using the Enigma a lot. Players can buy this ring easily from Reggie and Ward 13. And the last ring we use is the Mechanics Cog, which enhances this build's movement speed and damage reduction when using a heavy weapon. Players can also buy this from Cass in Ward 13. These accessories are perfect when clearing mobs, however when fighting bosses I would highly recommend changing the amulet to Death's Embrace, since you'll be tanking damage anyways, and that 20% boost to damage will help a lot. This amulet can be bought from Bedell of the Vaunt and Yesha in exchange for scraps. Replace the Braided Thorns with Xania's Malice, bumping the build's DPS further when hitting weak spots. This ring can be acquired in Root Earth's Ashen Wasteland section. And lastly, change the Groundstone ring to Hardcore Metal Band, which increases the build's damage reduction by taking advantage of the Bulwark buff when receiving damage. Players can find this ring in the World of Narude in the Navigation Room near the Titan's Reach checkpoint. This build can also be further enhanced if you have the Hyperconductor amulet that improves the effectiveness of the Engineer's heavy weapons. An added skill charge is huge, since players can use Juggernaut or Rampage twice in combat before it cools down. While for the armor pieces, I'm using the Engineer's starting set and changed the headpiece to the Navigator's helmet to match the theme. For this build, it is still suggested to use the Dragon Heart if you need healing, since using Relics while in heavy weapon stance is not possible. You will be tanking a lot of damage, thus replenishing HP as fast as you can is useful once the stance ends. For Relic Fragments, it will depend on your current ones, but for priorities, additional range damage, crit chance, and weak spot damage are welcome additions to this build. When it comes to traits, we need as much health as we can with this build, thus having a level 10 Vigor is ideal. You should also prioritize the Expertise trait as well for faster Challenger skill cooldowns. The Swiftness trait should also be level 10, granting the Hightech Sentinel additional movement speed. Players can unlock the Swiftness trait by unlocking the Explorer Archetype. A level 10 Barkskin trait is a must for this build too by adding an additional 10% damage reduction. This trait can be acquired by completing Madra's quest in Yesha. And a level 9 Glutton trait can significantly improve relic usage speed, and lastly, level 10 Footwork improves the build's movement aiming speed, as this greatly helps when using heavy weapons. The Hightech Sentinel's gameplay is fun and engaging, and its build loadout rotation varies depending on what situation the player is currently in or what enemy they are trying to fight. When fighting a group of enemies or when clearing dungeons in general, it is advisable to use a heavy weapon as a turret. In this build, the Vulcan will deal damage as soon as it was deployed, targeting nearby enemies. Overclock it to take advantage of unlimited ammo and added DPS. After overclocking the Vulcan, activate the Rampage skill and use the Heatsink mod of the Plasma Cutter to give it a significant boost of damage. Start clearing targets, and after a short time, your character will trigger Berserk. It is worth noting that kills from the turret count towards this as well, which really helps to ramp up your damage. When the Plasma Cutter mod expires, switch to the Enigma to hit multiple targets at once and generate mod power for the Plasma Cutter. Once the Heatsink mod is recharged, switch back to the Plasma Cutter and activate it once again. While fighting bosses, however, we will concentrate on using the heavy weapon Vulcan manually, and switching Rampage to the Juggernaut skill is a must before entering the boss arena. Once the battle starts, activate the Juggernaut skill to have significant damage reduction. Manually use the Vulcan and overclock it. For 15 seconds, the Vulcan will have a fire faster rate, be much stronger, and have access to unlimited ammo. This burst window is enough to deal significant damage to bosses, especially when hitting weak spots. When overclock expires, keep using the Vulcan, depleting its ammunition. The overall damage reduction of this build is enough to withstand several attacks before using Relics. If you need ammo or simply need to restore your HP, use a Dragonheart charge to provide more for the Vulcan. Players can lessen the Vulcan's cooldown by continuously using Dragonheart charges and spawning ammo, so players can use it again with little to no downtime, since the usage of heavy weapons depends on its current ammo count. This is the purpose of bumping up the Glutton trait. Final thoughts. The Hightech Sentinel is simply a fun build to use because of its unique gameplay, but it is a build that heavily relies on its distinct arsenal. Having the ability to change stances adds a refreshing experience when battling bosses or when clearing battlefields. However, there is no denying that when manually using heavy weapons in general, there are great risks involved and a little bit of advanced play is required. Without the ability to roll, relying on your fast aiming movement speed in general is also a viable strategy, and we cranked it up so you can at least avoid minor attacks by just strafing while maintaining DPS. This build can withstand several attacks before going down, and popping relics can get you back up to higher HP quickly. And lastly, this build has so much room to grow, especially when exploring the other heavy weapons available, so feel free to play around with it and make your own version of it. So what did you think of our second build, the Hightech Sentinel? Are you guys still enjoying Remnant? What do you guys want to see in builds? Let me know in the comments below.